Section 9.3.5. You want to find the critical values for an 80% confidence level and a sample size of n is equal to 30. Before we do that, let's take a look at the picture here. We can see that this critical value is 1 minus alpha divided by 2 is the critical value on the left of the chi-square distribution. And we can see that the chi-square alpha divided by 2 is the critical value for chi-square that's to the right of that value. So what we want to do first and foremost is to be able to find the degrees of freedom. Okay, so to define the degrees of freedom, it's going to equal the sample size minus 1. So the sample size in our problem is 30, and 30 minus 1 gives us 29. Okay, and so now what we want to do is we want to be able to solve for alpha. Okay, so what does alpha give us? Well, we know that alpha is going to equal 100% minus the 80% confidence, which gives us 20%. And therefore that equals 0.20 as a decimal. Now, if we take a look at these two values here, the critical values, you're taking alpha and then dividing it by 2. So if we take alpha and then divide that by 2, which is 0.20, and divide that by 2, that gives us 0.10. So therefore, we have one critical value where it's going to be 1 minus that 0.10, which the chi-square is going to equal 1 minus 0.10 is 0.90. And the other one we know is going to be chi-square of 0.10. Okay, so we can determine the chi-square critical value either by using the table, the calculator, or StatCrunch. We're going to first use this by using the table. Okay, so if we want to use the table and we want to be able to find chi-square that has 0.90 and that critical value, and then we want to find the critical value for 0.10. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come down and look at our chart, right? And we know that our sample size was 30, and 30 minus 1 gave us 29. So let me go ahead and minimize this just a little bit here, just so we can see the whole picture of our critical value table. Okay, so we know that we have 29. So 29 represents our degrees of freedom. And then we're looking for the area of 0.90. So if we look for the area of 0.90, then we get the value on our table of 19.768. So therefore the critical value here is going to be 19.768. Okay, and now we want to be able to find the critical value for 0.10. So if we look at 29 again, and then we're going to go to 0.10, and therefore there's 0.10, and we get a critical value of the following, which is 39.087. So we get 39.087. So therefore those are the critical values. So basically what you would do is if you are looking at the chi-square distribution, and so this is what our chi-square distribution would look like, we would say that the first critical value, which is the critical value on the left, is 19.768. And that represents everything the area to the right, because that would be 0.90. And then if we would look at the other critical value, which is a critical value on the right, is going to be 39.087. And that means this entire area to the right is 0.10. just to get a graphical picture of actually what's going on there. Okay, so if we wanted to, we're going to start out with StatCrunch first. So if we want to know how to do StatCrunch, okay, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so it's really important to see the picture when we're using StatCrunch. All right, so we're going to open StatCrunch, we're going to go to Stats, and then we're going to go Calculators, and then we're going to scroll down to where it says chi-square, and it's going to bring up the chi-square distribution. Okay, so we know that our degrees of freedom from our problem is 29. So we're going to put 29 in there, okay? And now, if we want this first critical value, which is the left critical value, if we want to get 19.68, that means we want it to be greater than a certain value here. But we know that the area is 0.90. We don't know the critical value. So if we put in 0.90 and then compute, you see we're going to get 19.768 as the critical value. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, and then, so you can see here that this critical value represents this one right here, which is the same thing as this one right here. Okay, now if we want to find now this critical value, 39.087, we're still going to use greater than or equal to. We still have degrees of freedom of 29, but now this area to the right is 0.10. So we're going to put in 0.10 and then compute, and now we're going to get that value, 39.087. So again, this is the way to do it using StatCrunch. But again, you want to get used to the habit of drawing the picture so that you know what you're looking for. So therefore, this is going to represent the critical value to the right. Okay, now, if we want to use the TI-84, this process might be a little bit longer than the first two. And so therefore, however, I recommend using the table or StatCrunch before using the calculator in this situation. But just so that you have this available to you, I want to show you how you can use the calculator. So it is a little bit different than what we did here, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Math, and then we're going to scroll all the way down to where it says Solver, okay? And then you're going to press Enter. And at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put in, at this cursor, second distribution. And then we're going to scroll all the way down to number 8, where you see chi-square CDF. And we're going to press Enter. Now, the lower bound is going to be 0. The upper bound is going to be a variable x. And we're going to click this one to represent x. So if you just click it, it makes an x. And then we have the degrees of freedom, which is 29. And then we're going to select Paste. Okay, now at this point here, okay, if we want to be able to get this critical value of 19.768. Well, what this does is when this calculates it, it's going to calculate the area to the left of a chi-square distribution, which again is the reason why I recommend using the table or StatCrunch. But again, I want to make sure you know how to do that. So that means that the area to the left here is going to be 0.10. So we need to subtract 0.10, and then we're going to press Enter. And at this point, you're going to select alpha. You're going to hit alpha, and then you're going to hit Enter. And so it's calculating. And so as it's calculating, you're going to see from left to right, we get the lower bound of 19.768. Okay, now if we want to find this critical value, then all we do is hit the up arrow key, and that brings us back to the equation solver. And then we're going to come down here and change this 0.10 to 0.90, and then we're going to select Enter. And again, here at this cursor, you're going to select alpha and then press Enter because it's solving the equation is basically what it's doing. And then when you press Enter, it's calculating up here, and you can see that we get the right critical value of 39.087. So again, it might be a little bit sort of longer, and you might have to do a little bit more steps using the TI-84. If that is your preference, then you can do that. But I highly recommend when you're finding the critical values for chi-square to use the table and or the StatCrunch calculator.